There's a moment, right before a microphone squeals or a glass drops, when a room full of people just holds its breath. I stood in that moment, under the chandelier's glow, holding my champagne flute like it might save me. It didn't. Nothing could have prepared me for what Victor did that night. My name is Elaine Langston. I'm 56 years old, and I live in Philadelphia. That night, I was supposed to be celebrating my son's medical school graduation, his achievement, our family's triumph. I had picked the venue myself, a restored ballroom overlooking the Schuylkill River. Every guest was someone who mattered: senators, surgeons, journalists, and family, lots of family. Victor, my husband of 32 years and a news anchor known across the East Coast, stood beside me at the podium, his arm around me, his voice velvet smooth. Everyone smiled. Cameras flashed. I remember thinking how proud Nathan looked, standing beside his girlfriend near the stage. Then Victor cleared his throat, his hand dropping from my shoulder. "Before we close out this incredible evening," he said, "I have a personal announcement." That was the first crack. "I want to thank Elaine for everything she's done, not just for Nathan, but for me, for our home, for our life together. It's been more than I ever deserved." A murmur rolled through the crowd. He kept smiling, but his tone had changed. "And with respect and sincerity, I need to be honest tonight. Elaine and we're separating." Just like that. The silence came fast and hard. You could hear the chime of a dropped spoon 3 tables back. My grip tightened on the stem of my glass. I looked at Victor, at the way he avoided my eyes. Lila Hart stood 3 feet behind him, Victor's on-air digital engagement correspondent. She stared at the floor, her lips parted just slightly, like she hadn't expected him to do it this way. Neither had I. But I didn't blink. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. That's what he wanted. Public humiliation. A takedown with an audience. I set my glass down carefully, stepped to the mic. My voice didn't shake. "Thank you, Victor," I said, slow and measured. "You always did love a broadcast." Someone in the back gasped. A few turned toward Lila. She shrank under their gaze. "Since we're being honest," I continued, "I've been preparing for this announcement too." I reached into my clutch and pulled out a manila envelope. It looked harmless, even boring. I slid it across the podium toward him. "You'll want to read that tonight. But not before dessert, it's dense." He stared at the envelope like it might explode. I gave him the smallest smile, the kind I'd practiced in the mirror for weeks. Then I turned, lifted my champagne again, and walked off the stage. There were no cameras flashing now, just silence. And stares. As I passed Lila, I looked her in the eyes and whispered, "He's not as generous when the cameras aren't rolling." She flinched. Nathan rushed toward me, but I brushed his hand lightly. "Finish your night," I said. "You earned this." "I'm fine." He looked confused. I kissed his cheek, smoothed his collar, and walked through the crowd with my head high. Outside, the air was cool and still. I didn't need to look back. I knew exactly what was happening inside that room. Shock, questions, whispers. And Victor, holding an envelope that would change everything. Let him squirm. Let the whole room squirm. This wasn't the beginning of the end. This was the beginning of the plan. The doorman barely looked me in the eye as I entered the building. I don't blame him. News like that travels fast, especially in a building full of wealthy professionals who thrive on scandal. He probably didn't know whether to offer congratulations or condolences. The penthouse was quiet when I stepped in. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that follows a public ambush. I set my bag down by the console table and kicked off my heels. My feet throbbed. My spine ached. But I felt lighter than I had in months. I walked straight to the master closet. It took less than a minute to find the luggage. Hidden behind Victor's golf bags, 2 identical black suitcases with TSA tags still looped through the handles. He packed in advance. Of course he did. There were folded shirts, still in the dry cleaner's plastic, and the suede loafers he only wore when he wanted to impress someone younger. Tucked beside them was a dopp kit. Inside, a monogrammed shaving brush I'd given him 2 anniversaries ago. The irony didn't sting as much as I thought it would. He was planning to leave the next day. He just hadn't expected me to leave first. My phone buzzed. A flood of missed calls. Texts from guests asking if it was really real. A short message from Victor, "Can we talk?" I deleted it. The only person I called was Nathan. "Mom?" His voice was tense. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine, sweetheart." "Really?" I sank into the armchair by the window. "I just wanted to make sure you weren't blindsided." I don't even know what to say." "You don't have to say anything. Just enjoy your night. We'll talk soon." He hesitated. "Did you know?" I paused. "Let's just say I had my suspicions." And I had. Months ago. It started with small things. Unusual charges on our joint credit card. A dinner for two at an exclusive restaurant on a night Victor claimed he was working late. A dry cleaning bill with lipstick stains on a collar. Not mine. I asked once, directly. He gave me that anchorman smile, the one he reserved for camera tests and lies. That's when I knew I couldn't ask again. I had to confirm it on my own. My background in risk analytics had once made me the go-to person for spotting fraud in corporate portfolios. I simply turned those skills inward. I reviewed our accounts, noted cash transfers, unusual wire withdrawals, the slow siphoning of our joint assets into a trust with only Victor's name on it. He wasn't just having an affair. He was preparing to disappear. But he'd forgotten something. The marital contract he had insisted on 27 years ago, after a mentor convinced him prenups were smart business. A contract he hadn't updated, hadn't even reread, since Nathan was a toddler. I read it every year. Especially the clause about fidelity and asset division. I documented everything. Every date. Every suspicious payment. I even recorded a conversation, Victor on the phone with Lila, unaware I was in the next room. I didn't confront him. I just filed it away. By the time I placed that manila envelope in his hand, the case was airtight. Victor always loved control. He built his whole career around controlling the story. But now I was the one writing the script. And I wasn't finished. It was almost midnight when the elevator dinged. I didn't flinch. I was still in the armchair by the window, robe tied, legs crossed, sipping cold chamomile tea that had started hot. The front door flung open without hesitation. Victor. His tie was gone, shirt untucked, hair slightly out of place, the polished newsman undone. He stormed into the living room like he owned it, which, legally speaking, he didn't. "You ambushed me," he said, voice tight. I took a slow sip. "You mean like you did tonight? Except I gave you an envelope. You gave me public humiliation." He dropped his overnight bag by the coffee table. "You made a scene." I set the cup down. "No, Victor. I ended one." He paced, mouth opening, then closing. "You made me look like a villain." I tilted my head. "You were a villain. I just gave the audience a better camera angle." He stopped. "What's in that damn envelope?" I reached for the leather folder on the table, my copy. I flipped it open with care, like I'd done 100 times. Let's start with the wire transfers. Offshore account in the Caymans. Funny place for emergency savings. Then the personal expenses billed to the Langston Foundation corporate card, meals, hotels, a pair of diamond earrings Lila conveniently wore on air 2 weeks ago. His jaw clenched. "You've been spying on me." "I've been protecting myself." He moved closer, lowering his voice. "Elaine, this doesn't have to get ugly. We can work through this." I looked up at him. "You had your bags packed, Victor. Don't pretend this caught you off guard." He opened his mouth again, ready to charm, to pivot, to script his way out. I cut him off. "You violated the contract. Page 6. Fidelity Clause. Section 4, Paragraph 2. In the event of proven extramarital conduct, the aggrieved party shall retain primary claim to shared assets, excluding any property acquired prior to marriage or specified as inheritance." You remember that, don't you? He blinked. That clause was time-limited. "No, Victor, it wasn't." Page 14, amendment added after Nathan's birth, notarized and signed. I kept the copy. Your lawyer didn't. He sank onto the sofa, running both hands through his hair. "You can't enforce that." "I already did. The filing is prepared. My attorney will submit it in the morning." He looked at me then, really looked, like he was seeing a stranger. "Who helped you?" I raised an eyebrow. "Does it matter?" He stared at the floor, voice low. "Rachel." It was Rachel. I didn't answer. "She's my sister. And a federal judge," I said. "One who believes in accountability." He stood again, eyes sharp now, the facade cracking. "You'll ruin me." "No," I said. "You did that yourself." He stared at me for a long beat. "You're not the woman I married." "You're right," I said, rising. "Back then, I was someone who gave up a career to manage your calendar and iron your shirts. Now I'm someone who documents bank fraud while you're sleeping." He grabbed the envelope from the table. "What else is in here?" "Enough to make a judge side with me. Enough to make your PR team sweat." He didn't speak, didn't move, just stood there holding the weight of his own choices. "You should go," I said, brushing past him. "The guest room is locked. You might want to try Lila's place. I'm sure she's thrilled about your upcoming deposition." Victor didn't follow me down the hall. He didn't call out. He just stood there, defeated, holding the story he couldn't control. And I went to bed. I had court in the morning. Rachel's house smelled like old books and fresh lemon polish. It always had. Even when she was still presiding over a courtroom and not retired in West Mount Airy, sipping Bordeaux and reading Grisham novels by the fireplace. I showed up just after 8 the morning after the confrontation. I had my suitcase, 2 garment bags, and 1 very large tote of paperwork. She opened the door in a gray cashmere robe and didn't ask a single question. Just stepped aside and said, "About damn time." I didn't cry. I don't cry when people expect it. I just walked in, set my bags down, and exhaled the breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. Rachel poured wine, yes, at 8 in the morning. Victories deserve toasts, she said. I took the glass, sat on her leather couch, and stared out at her garden. It's not over. No, she said, sitting beside me, but he's bleeding. And you have the blade. We were quiet a while, sipping. Then I reached into my tote and pulled out a second envelope, identical to the one I'd handed Victor. She raised an eyebrow as I slid it to her. What's this? Everything, I said. The bank records. The clause language. My affidavit. Screenshots. Voice memos. Rachel flipped through it slowly, nodding. He's going to panic when he realizes how well this is organized. He already has. Good. We didn't speak again until the front door opened and Nathan walked in, shoulders tense, face unreadable. He didn't say hello. Just stood in the entryway, jaw clenched, eyes flicking from me to Rachel and back. Hey, sweetheart, I said softly. Is it true? He asked. I stood, setting my glass down. Yes. Everything Dad said, what he did, was that real? That wasn't some stunt? I shook my head. It's real. He stepped closer. And the envelope? Also real. He sat heavily in the armchair across from us. Jesus. Rachel handed him a fresh glass of wine. He didn't touch it. I didn't tell you before graduation, I said. I didn't want this to ruin your moment. Nathan scoffed. He ruined it anyway. I thought I could keep the fallout away from you just a little longer. I needed to get everything in place first. You mean you knew? For how long? About 6 months. He looked like he was trying to be angry, but what came through instead was hurt. You should have told me, he said. You shouldn't have gone through this alone. I walked to him and knelt in front of the chair. You were becoming a doctor. That was your focus. I couldn't let your father's mistakes bleed into your future. His eyes softened. You protected me. I nodded. He reached out, touched my shoulder. I'm not a kid anymore. You don't have to do this by yourself. Rachel, still watching from the couch, lifted her glass in silent approval. Nathan sat back, rubbing his jaw. I want to talk to him. I need to hear his side. I understand, I said. But I want you to know, whatever he says, my loyalty's here. My throat tightened, but I didn't cry. I just nodded again and said, thank you, baby. And for the first time since this all started, I felt like maybe I wasn't alone in this after all. It was almost dusk when the doorbell rang. Rachel looked up from her crossword puzzle and sighed. You expecting a package? No, I said, even though I already had a feeling. Nathan was on the back patio. I had just brought him a cup of coffee. He needed it. He'd been up late helping me organize my documents and reviewing my timeline for court. Every time I looked at him now, I saw less of the teenager who once needed my help with science projects and more of the man who now asked legal questions like he meant them. When Rachel opened the door, the silence between her and the visitors was almost comical. No warm greetings. No fake pleasantries. Just an arched brow and a slow, flat, well, if it isn't King Betrayal and his sidekick. Victor didn't even try to smile. Lila stood slightly behind him, arms crossed tightly over her chest, her expression caught somewhere between nervous and furious. We need to talk to Elaine, he said. Rachel turned her head toward me. You want them in your living room? Sure, I said. Let's finish the show. Victor stepped in like he still owned every room he entered. Lila followed, more hesitant, eyeing the space like it might bite her. I see you're settled in, Victor said, glancing at the suitcase near the door. Just until the storm passes, I replied. You're the weather system, if that wasn't clear. Lila's eyes flicked to the manila folder in my hand. Are you really freezing the accounts? Victor asked. That wasn't necessary. Oh, I assure you, I said, it was. You can't just lock me out of everything. This affects me too. I looked at him evenly. Not according to our prenup. Lila shifted her weight, finally speaking. You didn't tell me about any contract. Victor turned slightly. It wasn't relevant. It is now, I said calmly. Especially since half the assets you assumed would be available for your fresh start are no longer yours to touch. Lila's eyes narrowed. You lied to me. I didn't lie, Victor said quickly. I just didn't go into detail. That's not better. Victor tried to regroup. Elaine, we just want to resolve this amicably. There's no need to turn this into a circus. Funny, Rachel muttered, since you brought a clown. Lila's face hardened. You think this is funny? No, I said. I think it's tragic. For all of us. But that doesn't mean I'll roll over and play gracious wife while you two move into my financial future. Victor stepped forward. You don't want to do this. No, Victor, I said. You didn't want me to do this. But I am. Nathan stepped into the room just then, holding his coffee. He froze when he saw them. Hi, Dad, he said flatly. Then his eyes shifted to Lila. And you? Victor straightened. Nathan, can we speak privately? No, Nathan said simply. We can't. Nathan, I saw the texts. Mom didn't show me. I looked them up myself. She was trying to protect you. But you weren't protecting anyone. Victor paled. You don't get to demand access to money, Nathan said, voice even, when you cashed out on your family. Lila turned to him. I didn't know. I swear. I don't care, Nathan said. You still showed up here like we owe you something. Victor's voice cracked. Elaine, can't you at least unfreeze the joint? Rachel stood up. That's enough. Her voice cut the room in half. Calm, controlled, but with an edge that could saw through brick. This is my house, she said. And I'm not watching you two demand money from the woman you betrayed. Get out. Victor looked stunned. Lila, to her credit, looked mortified. Now, Rachel said, arms crossed. They left. Not with a slam, not with an insult. Just quiet steps and a door closing behind them. Nathan looked at me. That went better than I thought. I laughed, just a little. There's still time for worse. But Lila had looked shaken. And Victor? He looked like a man realizing his parachute was packed by someone else. And the ground was coming fast. The courthouse didn't look like much from the outside, just red bricks, chipped paint on the pillars, and metal detectors at the front. But to me, it looked like a finish line. Victor arrived exactly 8 minutes late, wearing a tailored navy suit and that news anchor smile that had worked for him for decades. He nodded at people like they were viewers on the 6 o'clock broadcast. I knew better. So did the judge. It was a family court hearing, no cameras, no fanfare. Just one overqualified woman determined to reclaim her life and one man too arrogant to believe it was already gone. His attorney was some hotshot corporate guy in $1,000 shoes. I recognized the type immediately, confident in boardrooms, useless in custody disputes and fidelity clause litigation. He flipped through papers like he could bluff his way through decades of marriage. I hoped Victor had paid him in advance. Rachel sat behind me, not as a judge, but as a sister. Nathan was beside her, silent but steady. Every time I felt the weight of the moment, I looked at them and remembered why I was doing this. Judge Kaminsky reviewed the documents for almost 10 minutes before saying a word. Mrs. Langston, your file is extensive. I've always believed in thorough documentation, I said. Victor's lawyer stood. Your Honor, we'd like to argue that the fidelity clause in the prenup is outdated and unenforceable, particularly considering the length of the marriage. Kaminsky raised one brow. Outdated? The clause was amended and re-signed after the birth of your son, and there are notarized copies in both parties' possession. Victor shifted uncomfortably. Furthermore, she continued, we have evidence, substantial, well-organized, time-stamped evidence, that Mr. Langston breached this clause. Repeatedly. His lawyer tried again. We'd argue that the financial consequences outlined are disproportionate. I don't care what you argue, Kaminsky said flatly. This isn't cable news. It's contract law. The courtroom was silent. Victor looked up at me once. Just once. And what I saw in his eyes wasn't anger. It was fear. Not because he was losing assets, but because he was losing the version of me that used to fold quietly under pressure. That version was gone. I buried her in a file folder and drove her to court. Kaminsky flipped through the last page, signed her initials, and looked up. I find the marital contract valid and enforceable. Mrs. Langston retains all primary claim to jointly held assets as outlined. Victor's lawyer sat down heavily. Victor stared ahead like he didn't hear it. But he had. Outside the courtroom, he caught up to me. Elaine, he said, softer now. We don't have to keep fighting. I turned. We're not fighting, Victor. I already won. He opened his mouth to say something else, but I walked away. I didn't need to hear it. He'd had years to speak honestly. That window was closed. And I was already halfway down the steps, heading back to my new life. No cameras, no script, no anchor. Just freedom. The first tabloid headline dropped 5 days after the court ruling. Anchor Langston's divorce drama, legal woes and luxury losses. I didn't read the whole thing, but Rachel forwarded me a copy with a single-line email. Guess who's no longer controlling the narrative? Victor's fall wasn't loud at first. It was slow, quiet, embarrassing in the way that hits a man like him hardest. His sponsors started pulling out within a week. The luxury watch brand he'd been a lifestyle ambassador for quietly removed his photo from their homepage. By the time the network issued a statement saying they were re-evaluating long-term partnerships, it was already over. Lila Hart left him soon after. Rachel told me she moved out of his apartment and into a short-term rental across town. Rumor had it she'd started freelance work. No more glitzy Instagram reels from the network studio. No more branded content about power couples and media. She unfollowed Victor on social media and deleted their joint vacation photos. Poof. When it came to rebuilding, I started small. A name, an idea, a fresh start. It was Rachel, actually, who first said it. You should do something with this. All this pain, all this knowledge, you've got a blueprint now. Women need that. And they did. By the end of the second month, I had a name, Langston Advisory Group. A boutique consulting firm that specialized in helping women, mostly high net worth or public-facing, navigate the financial and legal fallout of divorce. I didn't go looking for clients. They came to me. A senator's chief of staff. A woman in biotech with patents under dispute. A philanthropist whose loving husband of 30 years was funneling donations into offshore accounts. They came because I understood. Not just the math, but the betrayal. Not just the paperwork, but the paralysis that comes when someone unravels your life while smiling at the camera. By the third month, I was profiled in a regional business magazine. From betrayal to brilliance, they called it. A little melodramatic, sure, but it made me smile. Nathan visited often. He'd drop by my new office, bring pastries from Reading Terminal Market, sit on the edge of my desk and ask about trust restructuring and asset shielding like he was studying for a second degree. I told him he didn't need to understand it all. He said, I want to. Because of you. As for Victor, I don't know what he's doing now. Maybe hosting a podcast. Maybe yelling into a camera from his condo kitchen. I stopped keeping track. He once told me the worst thing you could do to a man like him was take away the spotlight. Turns out, the worst thing you can do is take away the audience. And I was just getting started. 6 months later, I stood outside Philadelphia Family Court on a gray October morning, watching the leaves skitter across the stone steps like they were in a hurry to be anywhere else. I wasn't. I took my time. Inside my bag was the final decree. Everything else had already been decided, assets divided, trust untangled, real estate reassigned. This was just the final stroke of the pen. One more signature. One last page. The clerk barely looked at me as she stamped it. Congratulations, she said, sliding the paper back across the counter. I smiled. Thank you. It was our 30th wedding anniversary. Or it would have been. Victor had called me once a week ago. No lawyers. No staff. Just him. I've been thinking, he'd said, voice low, quiet in a way I'd never heard from him before. About us. About everything. I know I was wrong, Elaine. I wonder if there's any way back. There was silence on my end for a beat. Not because I was considering it, but because part of me still marveled at how long it had taken him to realize the cost of what he'd done. Victor, I had said, there's no going back. You just didn't know I was already moving forward. Today, as I walked out of the courthouse, I didn't feel like celebrating or crying. I just felt steady. Nathan was waiting outside in a gray wool coat, leaning against a light post with 2 coffees in hand. Hey, he said, offering me the one labeled Mom, balance scale nail polish medium light skin tone, in black marker. I laughed. Really? Figured it matched your brand. He walked with me back to the car, sipping his drink like it was any other day. But I saw the way he looked at me when he thought I wasn't paying attention. Like he saw me differently now. I read the article in Finance and he said. The part where you said you weren't becoming someone new, just returning to who you always were. I meant it. He nodded. It shows. Later that afternoon, I returned to my office. 3 new consultations. 1 media request. A gift basket from a client I'd helped win custody of her architectural firm and her 2 Labradors. At 5 o'clock, I poured myself a glass of wine. A modest Sauvignon Blanc. No vintage label. Just something clean and sharp and honest. I sat by the window, watching the city move, horns honking, people rushing, lives unfolding. I thought about the last 30 years. The compromises, the quiet betrayals, the years of being reduced to a title beside someone else's name. And then I thought about today. I hadn't transformed. I hadn't reinvented. I'd reclaimed. Elaine Langston, single. Elaine Langston, CEO. Elaine Langston, whole. That was my real anniversary. And I planned to celebrate it every year.